human follows alien girl into the frost fields, discovering a memory he never lived. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. John Anderson stepped into the icy landscape, his breath turning to mist as it left his lips, the bitter cold seeping through his clothes. The wind howled across the frozen fields, carrying the sting of the snow and the biting chill that seemed to freeze everything in its path. The landscape was vast, stretching out in all directions as far as the eye could see, a barren expanse of white that seemed endless. He couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation, as though the world had been stripped of everything familiar, leaving nothing but cold and emptiness. He glanced over his shoulder, watching as Alara, the alien girl he had been following, moved gracefully through the snow ahead of him. Her bright blue skin shimmered slightly in the pale light of the distant sun, her silver hair flowing behind her like a cloud of stardust. She didn't seem to feel the cold the way he did, her steps light and confident despite the harsh conditions. He couldn't help but admire her resilience. They had been traveling for hours, and John's body ached from the effort of keeping up with her. She had been quiet for most of the journey, her thoughts seemingly far away, lost in a world he couldn't understand. But he knew something had drawn her to this place, something important, something she had to find. And so, he followed, not knowing exactly why, but trusting that somehow, this journey would lead to something he couldn't yet see. The snow crunched underfoot as John took another step, feeling the weight of his own thoughts pressing down on him. He had been a soldier, a fighter, a man used to physical challenges. But this was different. This was not about fighting an enemy or surviving a battle. This was about something deeper, something that had been calling to him since he first met Alara. He wasn't sure what it was, but he felt it in the pit of his stomach. The strange sense of connection he had with her was undeniable. It was as though they shared something, a bond that he couldn't explain, but which seemed to grow stronger with every step they took together. Alara paused ahead of him, turning to face him for the first time since they had set out. Her eyes, a brilliant gold, locked onto his, and for a moment, the world seemed to fall away. There was no wind, no cold, just the two of them, standing in the vast emptiness of the frost fields. "Do you know why we're here?" Alara asked, her voice soft but steady. John shook his head, unsure of how to answer. "I don't," he admitted. "But I know I'm supposed to be here with you." Alara's expression softened, a hint of something like relief flickering across her features. She nodded slowly. "There is something here," she said, "a memory, one that was never meant to be mine. But I can feel it, like it's part of me." John watched her closely, feeling the weight of her words settle deep inside him. "What kind of memory?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara's gaze turned distant again, as though she were looking into a past she could barely touch. "A memory of a life I never lived," she replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "A life that belongs to someone else, but is somehow connected to me. And now, I have to find it." John didn't fully understand, but the earnestness in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. Without saying another word, he stepped forward, his feet crunching in the snow as he moved to stand beside her. "Then we'll find it together," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. Alara looked at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you, John." The wind howled once more, but this time, it didn't seem so cold. Together, they continued into the frost fields, each step bringing them closer to the unknown, to a memory that would change both their lives forever. The cold wind continued to whip across the frost-covered plains, its icy fingers biting into John Anderson's exposed skin. His breath came out invisible puffs as he trudged forward, his boots sinking into the deep snow with each step. Alara moved ahead, her form almost blending with the white landscape, the glow of her blue skin the only thing standing out against the vast whiteness. The distance between them grew smaller as John quickened his pace to catch up, determined to stay by her side no matter how harsh the conditions became. He could feel the weight of her words from earlier, her cryptic mention of a memory that didn't belong to her. A memory of a life she had never lived. It was clear to him now that this journey wasn't just about survival in these freezing fields, it was about something much deeper. Something that connected them both, though neither of them fully understood it yet. Alara stopped suddenly, her head turning slightly as if listening to something on the wind. John paused, instinctively scanning the horizon. The wind howled louder, but there was no sign of danger, no movement, no change in the landscape. Still, something in Alara's posture had changed. She was tense, alert. "What is it?" John asked quietly, taking a cautious step forward. Alara's eyes, bright and perceptive, flicked back to him. "There's something ahead." "It's where the memory is," she said, her voice low but steady. "I don't know how I know, but I can feel it. We're getting close." The uncertainty in her words wasn't lost on John, but the confidence in her tone was undeniable. He nodded, feeling the pull of her words deep within him. Together, they moved forward, the terrain becoming steeper, the wind fiercer, the snow thicker. They had been walking for hours, but John knew that the journey was far from over. The memory Alara sought was not just a distant recollection of her past, it was something that had the potential to change everything. It was as though their fates were intertwined, their paths leading them to the same destination, though neither of them had planned for it. The cold continued to press in on them, but John couldn't help but feel a warmth growing between him and Alara. It wasn't the warmth of a fire, but something deeper, a bond that was starting to form, slowly and steadily, with each step they took together. He had come to help her, to be there when she needed him, but somewhere along the way, he realized it was more than just that. He was part of this journey, part of her quest to uncover this lost memory. And as they walked, side by side, he couldn't shake the feeling that the discovery they were about to make would not only change Alara's life but his as well. Alara suddenly stopped, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. The snow was heavier now, falling in thick flurries, but through the veil of white, John could make out a dark silhouette rising from the frozen ground. It was an ancient structure, its stone walls weathered by centuries of exposure to the harsh elements. It stood tall, its jagged edges silhouetted against the grey sky, as though it had been waiting for them. Alara took a step forward, her hand reaching out toward the structure, her voice barely a whisper. "This is it. The memory is inside. I can feel it." John followed her, his heart racing with anticipation. As they approached the entrance, Alara paused, her hand lingering over the ancient door, as if preparing herself for what lay beyond. The air around them grew colder, the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. "Are you ready?" John asked, his voice soft but steady. Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on the door. "I have to be. This is my past, my future. Everything changes here." Together, they stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the unknown, the door closing behind them with a soft thud. The memory Alara had sought was just within reach, and John was right beside her, ready to face whatever came next. The stone door closed softly behind them, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to vanish, replaced by a heavy silence that enveloped John and Alara. The only sound was the soft crunch of their boots on the ancient, dust-covered floor as they stepped deeper into the darkened interior of the structure. The air inside was cold, but not the biting frost they had endured outside. It was a different kind of chill, one that seemed to seep into their bones, a remnant of something long forgotten. The walls around them were lined with faded carvings, intricate designs that seemed to tell a story, though the language was unfamiliar to John. He could feel the weight of history in the air, as though they had crossed into a place untouched by time, a place where memories were preserved. Alara moved ahead, her eyes scanning the walls, her fingers brushing lightly over the carvings as if trying to piece together something long lost. "It's here," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast, empty space. John followed her, feeling the pull of her words deep within him. There was something in the air, something ancient and powerful. It was as if the very walls of the structure were alive with the memories of the past, and Alara was on the verge of unlocking them. As they moved further into the depths of the building, the temperature seemed to drop even lower, and a strange hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor and into their bones. John could hear the soft sound of something shifting in the distance, but there was nothing visible, just the feeling that they were not alone. "What is that?" John asked, his voice echoing in the stillness. Alara turned to him, her face a mix of anticipation and unease. "It's the memory," she said softly. "It's waking up." John's heart raced. The idea of a memory, something so intangible, coming to life was difficult to grasp, but Alara seemed so certain. He could feel her connection to this place, to whatever it was she was searching for, and he found himself drawn into it, unable to pull away. "I don't understand," John admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "This place, these memories, how can it all be real?" Alara's gaze softened, and she stepped closer to him. "It's not about being real or not," she said, her voice filled with a quiet intensity. "It's about understanding what came before, and what it means for what comes after." John nodded slowly, his mind racing to make sense of her words. They were standing in the middle of something vast, something ancient, and yet it felt incredibly personal, as if they were meant to be here together. The hum grew louder, and John could feel it vibrating through his chest now. It was almost like the pulse of a heartbeat, steady and rhythmic, echoing in the depths of the structure. Alara's eyes widened, and she stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "It's close," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. John reached out instinctively, his hand brushing against hers. He could feel the electricity between them, a connection that went beyond just physical proximity. It was as though something in the air was shifting, and they were caught in its current, unable to resist its pull. Alara stepped forward, her steps deliberate, and John followed, his heart pounding in his chest. As they reached the center of the room, the hum became deafening, filling the space around them, drowning out everything else. The wall seemed to pulse with light, and in that moment, John saw it, a vision, a fleeting image that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. It was a memory, but not his. It was Alara's. He could see her, as though in a dream, standing in a place that seemed far more familiar to her than this forgotten structure. Her eyes were filled with determination, but there was something else, something deep and painful, as though she was carrying a burden she could never let go. The image faded as quickly as it had come, leaving John breathless, his mind struggling to comprehend what he had just witnessed. "What was that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Alara didn't answer right away. She stood there, her gaze distant, as if she were trying to hold on to the memory that had just slipped away. "It's mine," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "A memory that I lost, but it was always meant for me." John didn't know what to say, but the weight of her words settled deep within him. He had just witnessed a part of Alara that she had lost, a piece of herself that she was now reconnecting with. It was more than just a memory. It was her story, and in some way, it had just become his too. The room was silent once again, the hum of the structure now a distant echo, fading into the background like a memory. John stood motionless, still processing what he had just seen. Alara was beside him, but her presence felt different now. She was no longer just the alien girl he had been following through the frost fields, she had become something else entirely. The vision of her in that far-off place, with her eyes full of determination and hidden pain, was still vivid in his mind. He could see her clearly, standing strong but burdened by something he couldn't understand. But he knew, deep down, that this was more than just a memory. It was a part of her soul, a piece of her past that had been buried, waiting to be unearthed. Alara turned slowly, her gaze distant as she stepped away from the central pillar, her mind clearly lost in the memory. John didn't move at first, unsure of how to bridge the gap between what they had just discovered and what it meant for them. He felt an intense pull, a need to understand her more, but the weight of her silence held him back. Finally, Alara spoke, her voice soft but carrying the weight of years of untold stories. "I've lived with this memory for so long, John. It's been a part of me, but not in the way I needed it to be. I've always felt disconnected. Like something was missing." John took a step toward her, his voice tentative, yet filled with compassion. "Do you feel any closer to it now? To understanding it?" Alara nodded, her eyes finally meeting his. I do. But it's not just my past I've been trying to find. It's something more. Something connected to you, to this moment. I don't fully understand it yet, but I know you're meant to be here with me, John. The words hung in the air, and John felt his heart race. He had known for some time that their paths were intertwined, but hearing Alara speak it out loud made it feel more real, more undeniable. I don't know what this is, Alara, he admitted. But I know I don't want to leave. Whatever this is between us, whatever this memory means, I want to be part of it. A faint smile touched Alara's lips, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by a look of resolve. There's more to uncover, she said. This place, this memory, it's not just about me. It's about what comes after, about the future that's waiting for us. But we can't do it alone. John's mind raced. What did she mean by the future? How did it connect to him? He wanted to ask more, but the weight of the moment held him in place. Alara stepped forward, her eyes searching his. We have to trust each other, she said softly. We've come this far, but the path ahead is uncertain. We can't let fear hold us back. Not now. Not when we're so close. John took a deep breath, his thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and clarity all at once. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew that something profound was unfolding before him. I trust you, he said, his voice steady. Whatever comes next, I'm with you. The room seemed to shift around them, the walls vibrating with a newfound energy, as if the structure itself was acknowledging their pact. Alara smiled, the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. Then let's find the rest of the memory, she said, her voice resolute. Together, they moved deeper into the ancient space, the promise of discovery pulling them forward into the unknown, side by side. The air around them seemed to hum with possibility, the weight of the past giving way to the promise of a future they could only begin to comprehend. The ancient stone walls loomed taller now, their surface covered in faint, glowing markings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. John followed Alara through the winding passage, his footsteps echoing off the cold surfaces. The deeper they ventured, the more the air seemed to thrum with energy, as though the very space around them was alive, holding its breath for what was to come. Alara moved with purpose, her steps confident and sure, but there was something in her eyes that betrayed her calm demeanor. There was uncertainty there, a quiet fear that she hadn't spoken of. John noticed it but said nothing, knowing that in this moment, words weren't necessary. They both felt it, the pull of discovery, of something they couldn't yet fully understand but were drawn to regardless. The deeper they went, the more the structure seemed to close in around them. The walls, once jagged and weathered, now smoothed into long, sweeping lines, creating a path that led them forward into an expansive, circular chamber. In the center of the room stood an enormous stone pedestal, ancient and worn, but still standing strong. It seemed to hum with a soft vibration that matched the one in the air. Alara's gaze locked onto it, and she stepped forward, her movements almost reverent. John followed her, feeling the weight of the room pressing down on him. There was something powerful about this place, something he could feel but not yet comprehend. As Alara approached the pedestal, she stopped and turned to John. Her expression was focused, her eyes searching his for something, as though she needed reassurance. John met her gaze, offering a silent nod. Without a word, Alara placed her hand on the pedestal, and the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. The ground beneath them trembled, and for a moment, everything went still. A soft, pulsing light began to emanate from the stone, illuminating the room in a soft glow. The hum in the air grew louder, more urgent, as if the very structure was awakening. Alara closed her eyes, and John could see her breathe in deeply, as though centering herself. She was ready. This is it, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. The memory, it's here. John stood beside her, watching in quiet anticipation. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he could feel it, something ancient, something powerful, was about to be revealed. The light around them grew brighter, the hum in the air more intense, and then, suddenly, everything went silent. The room was bathed in an almost blinding light, and in the center of the pedestal, a vision began to form. John's heart raced as the image became clearer, his eyes wide with wonder. It was a memory, but not just any memory, it was a life, a moment in time, unfolding before them. He could see Alara, not as she was now, but as she had been long ago. She was standing in a place he didn't recognize, her expression filled with determination and hope. She was different, stronger, her body more alive with purpose. But there was something in her eyes, something that John couldn't quite place. It was a sadness, an emptiness that seemed to follow her. And then, the image shifted. Alara was no longer standing alone. There were others with her, alien figures, some familiar, some not, and they were gathered around her, their faces filled with worry, with fear. Alara's eyes flicked to John, and in that moment, he understood. She was fighting something, struggling with a decision, with a future that was slipping away. The vision flickered, like a broken memory, and John could feel the weight of her pain. It was overwhelming, like the entire universe was pressing down on them both. The vision faded just as quickly as it had appeared, leaving them in the dimly lit chamber. The pedestal's light dimmed, and the hum in the air faded away. Alara pulled her hand back, her expression unreadable, but John could see the tears glistening in her eyes. She didn't speak at first, but he could feel the heaviness between them, the weight of what they had just witnessed. "I remember," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I remember everything. The choice I had to make, and the cost of it." John stepped closer to her, his heart heavy with the knowledge that whatever Alara had just uncovered, it was more than just a past. It was a part of her, and now, it was a part of him too. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. "Now, we move forward," she said softly. "Together." The words hung in the air, and John felt the weight of them settle deep inside him. This was just the beginning. The journey they had started was far from over, but now, they were no longer just two strangers on an unknown path. They were something more. Together, they would face whatever came next. The silence in the chamber seemed to stretch on forever, the air thick with the weight of what they had just experienced. John stood beside Alara, both of them lost in their thoughts, the memory they had uncovered still swirling in their minds. The vision of Alara's past, the choice she had made, and the cost of that decision weighed heavily on both of them. Alara had been through so much, more than John could comprehend, but he could feel the burden she carried, and it made him want to do whatever he could to help her carry it. But now, with the pedestal's light dimming and the hum in the air fading, they were left in the quiet aftermath. The ancient structure had given them the key to a part of Alara's past, but it had also opened up more questions than answers. What did this choice mean for them? What path lay ahead? Alara turned to face John, her expression more vulnerable than he had ever seen before. "I don't know what happens next, John," she said, her voice softer now, as if the weight of the memory had stripped away some of her usual composure. "I thought I could carry this alone, that I had to. But now I realize that I don't." John took a step closer to her, his heart aching for her. "You don't have to," he said, his voice steady, filled with a quiet determination. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Alara looked at him, her golden eyes searching his face, as though weighing his words. The faintest of smiles tugged at the corners of her lips, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, John," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know why, but I believe you." There was a long pause as they both stood there, the only sound the soft echo of their breathing in the vast chamber. It was as if time had slowed, as though they were standing at the edge of something unknown, a precipice they could not yet see. John could feel the uncertainty in the air, but he also felt something else, something that had been growing ever since they started this journey together. It was a connection, a bond that had formed between them, stronger than any words could express. "What do we do now?" John asked, his voice breaking the silence, though it sounded uncertain in his own ears. Alara turned away from him, her gaze fixed on the pedestal, her expression distant once again. "We keep going," she said, her voice firm, though there was a hint of vulnerability behind her words. "There's still more to uncover, John. The memory isn't finished. The choice isn't finished. I have to find the rest of it. John nodded, understanding her resolve, but he couldn't help but feel a flicker of worry. But how do we find the rest? He asked. How do we know where to go from here? Alara's gaze shifted back to him, and for the first time since they entered the structure, she seemed to have an answer. We don't know yet, she said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet determination. But I have a feeling. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. The path will show itself. It always does. John looked at her, his heart swelling with admiration. Alara had been through so much, yet she still carried herself with a strength that amazed him. She was more than just the alien girl he had met out in the frost fields. She was someone who had survived, who had fought, and who had faced the impossible. And now, she was asking him to walk alongside her. To be part of something bigger than either of them could fully understand. Then let's find the path, John said, his voice resolute. Alara gave him a brief nod, and without another word, she turned and walked towards the far side of the chamber. John followed her, his steps sure and steady, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. But this time, he wasn't walking alone. Together, they would uncover whatever lay in the memory, whatever path it would lead them on. And for the first time, John felt that whatever the future held, he was ready to face it, by her side. The air inside the ancient structure felt thicker now, charged with an energy that John couldn't quite explain. He followed Alara through the dimly lit corridors, the faint hum of the walls still resonating with the memory they had unlocked. It was as if the very foundation of the place was alive, pulsing with the weight of its forgotten history. Alara led the way, her pace steady and purposeful, yet there was something in her expression, something uncertain, that John couldn't ignore. He knew she was still processing everything they had uncovered, the memories of her past, the weight of the decision she had made. But there was no time to dwell on it now. They had come too far to turn back. They had to keep moving forward, together. We're close, Alara said, her voice low, almost to herself. John didn't ask what she meant. He could feel it too, the pull, the sense that they were nearing something significant. The walls around them seemed to close in, the path narrowing as they moved deeper into the heart of the structure. There was a strange sense of finality to the atmosphere, as if whatever lay ahead would be the last piece of the puzzle. Alara paused at the end of the corridor, her eye scanning the room in front of them. The light here was different, softer, as though it came from a source far beyond the walls of the chamber. The floor beneath their feet was smooth and polished, the stone reflecting the light in a way that made the entire room shimmer. At the center of the room was another pedestal, but this one was different. It was larger, more intricate, and as they approached, John could feel the air grow heavier, the energy intensifying. Alara stopped just short of the pedestal, her breath catching in her throat. "This is it," she whispered. John stepped up beside her, his heart beating faster now. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew that this was the moment they had been waiting for. The memory, the choice, it would all come together here. Alara reached out, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the surface of the pedestal. "It's all connected," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "This is where it all began. This is where I made the choice." John watched her closely, sensing the weight of her words. He could feel the depth of what she was saying, but there was still so much he didn't understand. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving the pedestal. "The memory I found wasn't just mine," she said slowly. "It's tied to something much bigger, something that reaches beyond me. It's about the future, about what comes next. And I need you to understand that." John's mind raced, trying to make sense of her words. But before he could ask more, the pedestal began to glow, its surface shimmering with a soft light that grew brighter by the second. Alara's hand dropped to the pedestal, and as soon as her fingers made contact, the light flared, illuminating the entire room. The walls around them seemed to pulse with energy, and for a moment, everything went still. Then, in an instant, the room was filled with images, visions of the past, of Alara's world, of the choices she had made. John stood frozen, watching as the scenes unfolded before him. He saw Alara, not as the person she was now, but as someone else entirely. She was a leader, a figure of immense power, standing before her people, facing a decision that would shape the future of her world. He saw the fear in her eyes, the weight of the responsibility she carried. He saw the pain, the sacrifice, and the love she had for those around her. The visions flickered, shifting from one moment to the next, each one more intense than the last. John felt as though he were being pulled into them, as though he was experiencing Alara's memories himself. He saw the moment she had made her choice, the moment that had defined everything that followed. And then, the vision shifted. Alara was standing alone, her face filled with grief. She had lost something, someone, and John could feel the emptiness that came with it. The images blurred, and for a brief moment, John felt as though he were losing his grip on reality. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the visions faded, and the light around them dimmed. The room fell silent once more, the energy dissipating as quickly as it had come. Alara stood still, her hand still resting on the pedestal, her face pale. John could see the tears in her eyes, the weight of the memory still hanging over her. I didn't expect that, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I didn't know how much it would hurt. John stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. It's okay, he said softly. You don't have to carry it alone. Alara turned to face him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, John, she whispered. I don't know what I would have done without you. John smiled, his heart swelling with a sense of connection that was deeper than anything he had ever known. You're not alone, he said. We're in this together. And for the first time, Alara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. It was the first step toward healing, and together, they would face whatever came next. The chamber felt quieter now, as if the visions had drained the very air from the room, leaving only the echo of what had been revealed. John stood close to Alara, watching the way her breath trembled, the way her golden eyes flickered with emotion she had not yet found the words for. The pedestal before them had gone dark, its purpose fulfilled, but the weight of what they had seen lingered like a soft vibration beneath their feet. Alara drew in a steadying breath and stepped away from the pedestal, her shoulders rising and falling with the effort of pulling herself back into the present. John followed her carefully, giving her space yet refusing to let the distance grow too large. He could feel her vulnerability, a quiet storm beneath the surface, and he knew she was trying to make sense of everything at once. There is something missing, she finally said, her voice thin but steady. The memory is not complete. There is one more piece, and I need to find it. John nodded slowly, sensing the shift in her tone. Do you know where it is? He asked. Alara's gaze drifted toward the far side of the chamber, where a narrow hallway branched off, almost hidden in the gloom. I think so, she said. I can feel it, like a faint echo. It is calling to me, the same way the first memory did. John felt a quiet shiver run through him, not from fear, but from the strange sense of connection that had been building between them. He could feel the pull too, faint and distant, like a memory he had never lived but somehow understood. Alara moved toward the hallway, her steps slow but determined. John followed beside her, the air growing cooler as they walked. The passage walls narrowed, their surfaces more jagged and irregular. A soft blue glow emanated from thin, branching veins in the stone, guiding their path like threads of starlight woven into the walls. When you saw the visions, Alara began quietly, her voice low and hesitant. Did you feel anything? Anything at all? John paused before answering, his mind returning to the images, her face filled with purpose, her people gathered around her, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a mountain. He had felt her fear, her hope, and something else, something that had rooted itself deep inside him. Yes, he said slowly. I felt something. I cannot explain it, but it felt like I was part of it. Like I was meant to see it. Alara's steps faltered for a brief moment, and she turned to him, her eyes wide with quiet shock. That is impossible, she whispered. These memories belong to my people. They are bound to my lineage. They should not connect to a human. John held her gaze, unflinching. Maybe they are not just your memories anymore. Alara stared at him, studying the sincerity in his expression, the steady beat of his words. There was a flicker in her eyes, fear, wonder, and something else she had never shown him before. If that is true, she said softly, then everything I thought I understood is wrong. They continued down the corridor, the air growing warmer now, the soft hum of energy returning, faint but familiar. At the end of the path, the hallway opened into a small chamber. It was simple, almost empty, except for a single object resting atop a flat stone slab. It was a crystal, shaped like a tear, glowing with a soft, blue light that pulsed gently, like the heartbeat of something alive. Alara inhaled sharply. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the last fragment." John stepped closer with her, feeling a strange tug in his chest, as though the crystal were pulling on something within him. Alara reached out, her hand hovering just above the surface of the glowing shard. "This memory," she said quietly. "It is not just mine." John's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Alara turned her face toward him, her expression open and unguarded in a way he had never seen before. "I mean," she said slowly, "that whatever we are about to see, it belongs to both of us." The light from the crystal brightened, bathing their faces in a soft blue glow. John felt his pulse quicken, not with fear, but with a sense of inevitability, as though destiny itself were unfolding before them. Alara lowered her hand. The crystal responded. And the final memory began to wake. The crystal's glow deepened, shifting from soft blue to a warm, silvery light that filled the small chamber. John felt the air around them tighten, as if the very space was holding its breath. Alara's hand hovered an inch above the crystal, her fingers trembling with the weight of what they were about to uncover. When she finally let her fingertips touch the surface, the chamber dissolved into light. John blinked, and suddenly he was standing in a wide, open field beneath a pale sky. Frost-covered grass stretched out toward the horizon, shimmering like a sea of tiny stars. The air was cold but gentle, carrying the scent of something sweet, something familiar, though he had never smelled it before. Alara stood beside him, but she looked different, her posture steadier, her expression serene. She let out a slow breath. "This is not the past," she whispered. "This is something else." John turned, trying to make sense of the landscape. "It feels like a memory," he said softly. "But not yours." Alara nodded. "Not mine, and not entirely yours either." In the distance, a faint figure emerged from the frost. It was a woman with the same glowing blue skin as Alara, her silver hair braided down her back. She walked with a grace that felt both ancient and familiar. John felt a strange tug in his chest as she approached, like an echo vibrating through him. When she stopped just a few feet away, she looked at him with eyes that held galaxies. "You were not born yet," she said gently, her voice layered like two tones speaking at once. "But you were chosen." The words struck him like a quiet revelation. Alara stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, and the air seemed to shimmer around her. "I am the keeper of our lineage, the guide of what was lost and what must be found." Her gaze shifted to John. "Your presence here is not an accident. You carry a resonance, a thread tied to our history. Not by blood, but by purpose." John's breath caught. "Why me?" She lifted her hand, and the frost beneath their feet rippled like water. Images rose from the ground in soft lights, Alara standing before her people, John walking through the frost fields, the ancient structure calling them forward, the pedestal glowing beneath their touch. "Because the memory you seek," the woman continued, "is not just a record of the past. It is a bridge. A connection between two lives, two choices, two futures that depend on one another." Alara stepped closer to John, their shoulders nearly touching. "Our futures," she whispered. The woman nodded. "Your choice was never meant to be carried alone," she told Alara. "And John, you were brought here because your presence gives her something she did not have before." John swallowed, his heart thudding softly. "What is that?" The woman's smile softened, illuminated by the frost-lit horizon. "Hope," she said simply. The field around them began to dissolve into shimmering light once more. The woman's silhouette faded, her final words drifting like a warm breeze. Walk together. What comes next belongs to both of you. The chamber returned in a soft rush of air. John blinked, finding himself standing beside Alara again, the crystal dimming as its purpose came to an end. The silence between them was different now, not heavy, not uncertain, but full. Alara slowly turned to him, her golden eyes bright with something he had not seen before. Not fear. Not confusion. Something steadier. Something like peace. John, she whispered, her voice trembling not with weakness but with relief. We were meant to find this together. He reached out, not to take her hand but to offer it, open and steady. Then we stay together, he said softly. Whatever path comes next. Alara looked at his hand, her breath catching, and then she placed her own in it. The crystal's last trace of light reflected in her eyes. Outside the ancient structure, the frost fields waited, endless, cold, and silent. But when John and Alara stepped back into the snow, the world no longer felt empty. The stars above them reflected in her eyes, and for the first time, they looked almost human.